Tämä on Rovaniemen kaupungin podcast-sarja Arktinen, arkinen Aalto. We are in Rovaniemi. I'm Tuija Seipell from Vancouver, and we have two guests at this time. One of our guests is Valentino Tignanelli from Italy and Argentina. And another architect, Charlotte Skene Catling, approximately correctly pronounced, I hope.
Perfectly pronounced, yeah.
As we are talking about Alvar Aalto and his legacy, you two are essential here because you both work in Oulu at the Aalto Silo project, which is very interesting in terms of being an industrial site. Before we get further into that one, can you tell me, Valti, why is an Argentinian-Italian architect in Oulu?
Of course, Oulu by itself is a really interesting frontier city, frontier of innovation, frontier to the European Arctic. But my main connection before coming to Oulu is the Peter von Bach movie, Muisteja, or Remembrance. And then from there, it was during Corona, I went to see the Silo and Meri Toppila. That's how I got involved while I was still studying in Oulun yliopisto.
That's amazing. And what about you, Charlotte? How did you end up working in this Oulu factory thing?
My husband and I discovered on the Brutalism Appreciation website this little building on the frontier of climate change in Oulu was for auction for almost no money. It seemed so extraordinary because Aalto has always been a hero of mine as an architect. Never in a million years did we think that we would actually acquire this building, but we did. Shortly after, Valti got in touch with us and announced that he was working on this project, which he has done with staggering success. And the adventure began.
It is also amazing. And Valti, you can probably talk about that. You are the CEO of this project, right?
I'm the project manager.
Project manager, whatever the terminology.
The lead architect, and of course, the building is owned by Factum Foundation.
Yes.
One of the most key aspects of the Aalto Silo project, and hopefully of any Alvar Aalto related restoration project, is restoring true culture. Not restoring a space to use for culture, but the culture itself creates a dialogue where the building is safe and create archive through the activation and cultural performances, and not the other way around.
Yeah, I didn't realize that Aalto, this factory, it's not a pretty thing, wide and glorious like these buildings here in Rovaniemi. It's a factory building. It's very much an industrial, utilitarian building. This was Alvar Aalto's first industrial building, right? 1931?
It was completed in 1931, and it was actually commissioned by an Englishman, a man called Dixon, who was trying to avoid paying transport costs in the UK.
Fascinating also that it could have been and probably would have been easier to just demolish the whole thing and build something else. So luckily people like yourselves got involved. Because it could have just as easily been demolished.
Absolutely. And I think it's acknowledged that was really the plan for it. And that would have been, and it's an interesting building because it divides people. Some people find it incredibly ugly, and some people find it very beautiful. And there is a huge fan of, brutalist architecture around the world who revere it as this concrete cathedral. But it's certainly memorable. And there is something very magical when you go inside and see this huge 28-meter high space opening above you. Magnificent.
There's beauty in a lot of things.
Yeah.
Let's then talk about these buildings in Rovaniemi that Alvar Aalto has designed and that have thankfully been restored and are being restored. The City Hall not yet quite finished. Valti, you have had the chance to visit also the City Hall building, and you come here quite often. Why do you come to Rovaniemi?
Well, I travel around Finland quite often. That's the nature of the Aalto Silo projects, besides the great support from Factum Foundation. So there is a lot of moving around and connecting and bringing also, when there's international visitors to Oulu, one of the best places to show parts of Finland is going to Rovaniemi. So, for example, last time that I was visiting the works on the kaupungit Mitä Aallon was with the Dutch professor Atse Worstra from the University of Delft. Yes, it's a very interesting late Aalto design, of course, completed after his passing, and it has a lot of interesting combination between functionality and beauty, like Aalto design. And we have here in Rovaniemi a great example of this integration of services and design that still upholds after 50 years. It's still very, very top-notch. So we are really lucky. You're really lucky. Rovaniemi is really lucky to have this high-class architecture. And I have to say, Aalto's signature or Aalto's name is really important. But these buildings stand on its own right, not only because they were designed by the Aalto studio, because they are great buildings.
That is great to hear, because although I have lived outside Finland for more than 40 years, I do confess that I am a Finn by nature and by sort of visual acceptance, in terms of, to me, these buildings are beautiful because they are white and simple and, basic and not curly and complicated and colorful. But it's not that necessarily to all people.
Actually, there's a complexity in
of course there is.
Those buildings, which I find so deeply impressive when I'm inside them. So yesterday we were in one of the buildings, and the way in which you're brought into that space, and the way there's just very subtle shifts in level. There's a generosity about the staircases. Every single detail is so beautifully thought out. So the balustrades and the handrails, which are wrapped in leather, so that your hands are never too cold. The way that you are met at the entrance of the building, the handshake to the building, with the beautiful curved door handles. Every single detail is beautifully thought, and it's the generosity, it's the warmth, and the sort of democracy of the buildings that I think made Aalto so internationally famous and admired. He was the humanist modernist. He was the one who it wasn't the cold, calculated international style. It was a warmth and a generosity that I really think is truly Finnish. That it's something that you find in the people, in every encounter. That there is a kind of characteristic that's expressed in those buildings. And I think, we talked very briefly before this conversation, about how that might be extended outside the buildings into that public space. There are all sorts of things that come out of the land itself, and the darkness, the climate. And I would be fascinated to see in Rovaniemi what could happen in that space. What are the different activities that you could put together to activate that area?
Yes, and what do you think, Valti, about the fact that I certainly imagine that Aalto meant for the outside area to be part of the buildings, and that the activity wasn't just inside the buildings and the library and the theater and the city hall, but that there is something communal happening on the outside. And it isn't happening. And of course, in one sense, you can understand that in the wintertime it's all snow, but snow's fun too. You can do a lot of things in the snow. What would you do with that outside area? What could happen there?
Well, I think there is great power in the in-between. I think we are in the transition times, and I think the role of architecture and design is actually crystallized those times. Like the silo is the crystallization of this extractivist economy of the beginning of the 20th century, and we should not erase history. And the in-between, as we are now, I think we are all feel like we are in these transition times, and in between a lot of stuff. politically, economically, and so on. That I think like this new space should reflect this transition. What I will maybe suggest or envision or put on the table is that we have the opportunity to create also in-between spaces in this in-between space, in the sense that activations and ephemeral structures can then have a material continuity with some stuff that in the future are more permanent, and don't get settled with one big idea, and instead have a constellation of maybe more modest interventions that, same as with constellations, all of these things can be little stars that can blink more or less. But at the end, you will see this like a big outline when the time passes. So if you create the conditions for these structures, for these spaces to be materialized, then it will be done by itself and by the community. And this is really important. This is really important.
And you can't really force anybody to come unless there is something
just
there.
To close it, is that if you really want a community-oriented space, you have to lose control. And this is very important. It's not so easy for cities by their own structures to do that.
You were going to say something here.
No, it's very interesting because of we've been working on the silo in increments, and, we do what we can with the money we have at any particular time. It's difficult. And so until now, we've had to hold all the events outside the space, so the public had to remain outside, and that was quite a challenge. But it became a very interesting one. So every constraint can be a kind of positive, design trigger in a way. And you don't need very much money to do these things. And we're trying to use the Silo project as a way of creating a protocol for reusing waste and keeping buildings, however impossible they seem to be, from being demolished. So those are two big, goals in a way. And I think, we're building in February an ice sauna. So this is something that will begin next year when Oulu is the European capital of culture. Rovaniemi, snow, ice, the things
sauna.
that could happen. Sauna.
Why not?
In this place. I mean, imagine that in that space.
The possibilities are endless, which is what makes it difficult too. Because there is in fact, no real limitation of.
But then it's the people. Then it's the people who are here, who have their interests and their focus. But as Valti said, I think the idea of something seasonal, creating a platform, a place where things can happen.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We have to finish, but I wanted really, really short, sort of 2-word answer. And I know this is sort of a nasty type of question when you are limited to so little. But I'd like you to tell me, Valti, what fascinates you about Alvar Aalto?
Well, to be very honest,
yes,
what fascinates me more about Aalto buildings or the Aalto heritage is not what I think about Aalto or what I personally enjoy about their buildings, but it's what it generates to people. And through that kind of like a tertiarized feeling, you can get to know a lot about why they were made and how they vibrate and resonate with the society. So it's kind of a politician answer, but it's not about maybe what I believe about Aalto, is what it generates to people. That is important for me.
What about you, Charlotte?
Oh, that's a difficult question.
It is. I'm sorry to put you on
but it's a fascinating one, and I think it is. I think as a sort of extension of Valti's point, I think Aalto and Aino, it's important that he worked very closely with 2 women architects who are equally important, I think.
And Elisa in particular here in Rovaniemi, because he finished the work.
Absolutely.
She finished the work here.
No, these women are extraordinary. And for me as a female architect, they were way ahead of the game. Architects, an inspiration for me since I was, before I was a student. And what they encapsulate a moment in time. And I think we can keep returning to that and sort of looking at where we are now, against what was going on in the world then and how they responded to it. And I think, what we really can think about doing is continuing in a way that's relevant today, that freedom of thought and that creative imagination.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you, Valti. Thank you, Charlotte. And this is the podcast of City of Rovaniemi called Arktinen, Arkinen, Aalto.